Hello, everyone, and welcome to RevMD Sex Bites podcast with me, your host, Dr. Deborah Durst. So I have Faraday with me today, our co-host, and then I have a guest with us, a special guest, Tim Smith from P3 Pharmacy, which is a local pharmacy here, which is amazing. He's the owner and operator, and again, a wealth of knowledge and experience, and our go-to for knowledge and experience. So when we have questions, we call Tim. So Tim, if you want to say hello.
Thanks for the invitation to be here
to
talk about some compounded options.
Yeah. Yep. And we were going to actually get on to, again, we kind of talked on another podcast about compounding in general, and again, if you have questions about compounding pharmacies or compounded medicines, then I would refer you to that podcast to learn a little bit more about it. And then we're going to talk about something related to sexual medicine that we use a lot of, which Tim is the only one I know that has formulated this combination, but it is a combination troche that we use frequently. And if you want to tell them a little bit about it, Faraday, because you brought it to me the first time.
Well, I think with anything, it's like you go to Tim and say, hey, this isn't working. What can we do? Or what do you have? And it was one of those conversations that led to, hey, I actually do have something we can try. It is a combination of Viagra and Cialis and a meltable form. And I think that your male patients may love it. And that's kind of where it took off. And from there, I haven't heard any negative feedback. I think the biggest thing is, can I have more?
Sure.
They always want more. A higher dose. It works so great. Can we increase my dose at all?
Right.
Well, definitely not just men, though. Like the women,
women
have loved it too.
Yes.
We may even know a staff or two that have really loved it. And so, yes, it's been a hit as well for women. So again, the combination, if you want to, even go into like the differences. So again, Cialis being tadalafil and Viagra being sildenafil. Those are two different medications, and everybody knows them as like Cialis and Viagra,
or the little blue pill.
The little blue pill. So, and this one happens to be like a blue-green sometimes, but anyhow, just talking a little bit about those medicines, and then I love going into the, physiology of how they work and what can help them work.
And the potency.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the beauties of compounding medications is being able to customize stuff. And one of the simple things is just combinations of active ingredients. So being able to take sildenafil and tadalafil together and put them into a single source preparation provides some unique opportunities for outcomes. And they're both working on enzymes and inhibiting enzymes that break down a natural occurring compound we have in our body called nitric oxide. You guys have probably read a ton about nitric oxide, particularly if you're looking at erectile dysfunction, sexual wellness. We could go 180 degrees and all the value that nitric oxide has in our body. But when we start to have lower nitric oxide levels, or it's broken down quicker, then obviously we start to have sexual wellness issues. In men in particular that we see in commercials on the TV, that's ED, or erectile dysfunction. So being able to do two different enzyme inhibitions will, a lot of times in guys, provide much better results. Dr. Durst has mentioned before, we can look at those different ones, tadalafil and sildenafil, and we look at short-acting, long-acting for a simple way to describe. So that beauty of putting those two together provides some logistical advantages for men as they use those compounded preparations and the effect that they get in managing that erectile dysfunction. Secondly, the dosage form we do it in, you guys had mentioned a little melty, dissolvable thing, right?
Yeah.
So we call that troches. So that's leveraging the sublingual route of administration. One of the advantages we talked about before in another podcast is different routes and different dosage forms. So by being able to do that, why do I bring that up? Why do you ladies, why do your patients like that? The fact that we can use much less of those active ingredients and avoid some side effects that a lot of guys will see with the commercial preparations. Because as you push the dose, typically we see side effects go up as we push doses in medication utilization. So being able to use much lower doses because we're getting it in the body more efficiently, and that sublingual route is a huge popularity in why we do so many of those troches on a week in and week out basis. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So those side effects that we hear often are flushing, headaches. A lot of guys say my blood pressure is crazy.
Nasal congestion.
And nasal
is
congestion.
like a huge
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what we're seeing in our patients is that by being able to utilize a smaller dose or a lower dose, and it being actually working more potently in the body as a sublingual, that we are minimizing those side effects, or they are no longer existent in patients, which
Yeah.
is awesome. So they're getting the benefit of the medication without all those negative side effects.
Yep, absolutely. You're not having to take 2 medications. Everything's compounded for you in one dosage form.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then actually you can take this on a daily basis as well, so that timing doesn't have to be an issue either. So there's been more and more data come out about low dose, tadalafil at least,
Absolutely.
where
Mhm.
low dose, again, you get all the other benefits of it, but also being good for the vascular system, anti-inflammatory, great for prostate health. And again, not worrying about the timing. So then when you're doing it on a low dose on a daily basis, you get health benefits from it. And there's more and more data and studies that are showing that, even just for prostate health.
Mhm.
But then likewise, you don't just have to worry about timing. And I think if you're having sex more than probably twice a week, then that's probably something to look at actually, because then you don't have to worry about
Waiting.
waiting.
Are my pills in my
taking
gym
it,
bag?
yeah,
Are they in the car?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Where are
sublingual
they?
route is nice too logistically, because if you are trying to time it and you haven't been compliant and taking something
Mhm.
daily, that sublingual route gets those active drugs in the system much more efficiently than swallowing something by mouth. So we typically tell patients in 15 or 20 minutes, you're going to have an effect. So is that ideal time frame? No. We know we'd like to have that a little bit more, but that sublingual route does give you that advantage to leverage if you're in a crunch for time and you
Mhm.
want to take something that needs to have an onset of action much quicker. So we typically, at that point, a lot of times I'll counsel the men and women and I'll say, you make that part of foreplay. Take your little troches,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then you can continue foreplay. But the time that foreplay is complete, your drug's probably going to be enough absorption that you're going to get therapeutic effect.
Did you hear that, guys? Foreplay. It should be part
Yeah,
of the
so
equation.
now he's not only speaking to us, he's speaking to all of you guys, because we've had multiple podcasts where we talk about how just important foreplay is anyhow.
Yeah.
So now,
And the sexual
Yeah.
response cycle we talked
Yeah.
about in a previous podcast,
Mhm.
and how important that actually is in the process. So
and for blood flow for women, that again, stimulation and arousal is blood flow. And so it's lubrication, it's all of the above. So now
Mhm.
you just gave us an even better foundation. for the
Exactly.
foreplay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that works. So, and then talking about, because again, I know that nitric oxide and NO is like a huge rabbit hole
Absolutely.
when patients start to, and especially men. There's a lot of men that are doing that, and the typical
Mhm.
L-arginine before the gym,
Absolutely. Yep.
L-arginine for sex.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, because even we were talking earlier, and again, he has just a strong foundation of all physiologic processes and chemical reactions in the body, and just listening to you talk about nitric oxide is wonderful. So if you want to go into that a little bit, and even how they might boost it.
Just to do a snippet of it, what we were talking about earlier is, how do you leverage nitric oxide that's in our body normally? As we age, our body's ability to produce nitric oxide starts to fatigue.
Mhm.
Probably correlates nicely, right? We start seeing in these decades of life when we start seeing alterations in sexual wellness, whether that's ED in men or pick whatever that is, that correlates with that nitric oxide levels being less. So how do we do that? There are supplements out there. You can get this L-citrulline, L-arginine supplements is very popular. But one of the things we try to educate our patients about, particularly if we're in that 4th, 5th, 6th decades of life, our own endogenous pathways of taking amino acids to make nitric oxide starts to be less efficient. So how can we circumvent that? There are other pathways to make nitric oxide. Well, that comes from nitrates. Where do we get nitrates? In our normal dietary intake, that's those things that mom wanted you to eat, spinach and beets and those type things, right? We probably don't eat enough of those, most of us, to have that pathway to be active so that we can maintain nitric oxide levels as the other pathway starts to decrease. So there's some nice supplements coming on the market now that we've seen fantastic results with, where we can actually look at those nitric oxide levels in the saliva and then go back, if those are low, supplement those with a nitrate supplement, and then we can then restore nitric oxide levels. So we get all of those benefits out there in the body physiologically if we focus on sexual wellness, and particularly men who take the tadalafil, sildenafil troches. Remember what we talked about a few minutes ago. We're stopping the breakdown of nitric oxide.
Yeah.
If you aren't making enough nitric oxide, it's going to be harder for that compounded preparation to provide the results that we're hoping for. So it works beautifully if we can find something based on where you are physiologically and nitric oxide endogenous production, and then marry that to the compounded preparation. We see much, much better results in those sexual wellness patients.
So for our guys that maybe are not seeing the results they used to see with their medications.
Correct.
Being the
Yeah.
Cialis or the Viagra specifically, they could take a supplement to
Correct.
increase their nitric oxide to make that medication more effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially.
Yeah. It's one of the beauties of supplement stuff. We start to see people leveraging these other pathways physiologically. And we've seen that now in a new product coming on the market that we're seeing fantastic results with.
I told him I'll be going and buying some today. I'm
Exactly.
excited about it.
And you can actually test,
Mhm.
with saliva
Mhm.
to see what your nitric oxide level is, and then test after
Yeah.
the supplement to see that it's increased. as
And
well.
what's
So-
interesting is that you were talking about how as you can take a supplement, think that you're going to be good, and really just not register at all on that dipstick.
Mm.
Yeah, I was telling the ladies, I
Crazy.
did it myself because I was kind of like a little skeptic, and I like to see data and science
Yeah.
behind stuff before we ask patients to take it, right? Or
Mhm.
spend their money on something. There's a lot of stuff out there that sounds good, but it really doesn't have good data behind it. So I was a little skeptical when it first came out and the representative was saying, "Hey, this will work great. What do you think about this supplement?" And so I was taking L-citrulline, L-arginine, and had been doing it for years. I thought, "Oh, I'll be great." So I do the little saliva test, and it was hardly detectable as far as nitric oxide levels. So I take 2 of the capsules, 2 little supplements. 2 hours later, repeat that, and bang, I was right in that therapeutic range. So for me, it was kind of like, whoa.
There's the
Right?
data.
So now I've got this objective thing.
Mhm.
So now subjectively, I'm going to start this and see if I see results.
And who doesn't like objective data?
Yeah,
right?
it's
Exactly.
a
You can see
great thing
numbers,
for you
yeah.
to see,
Mhm.
to be able to look at and say, is that really working for me?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's been nice to be able to bring that saliva test in. And the important part about it is the vendor that makes it, they've got nice science and correlations between the saliva NO levels and those serum NO levels.
All right.
And that's
So
so,
that's-
important with supplements because it's
Yeah.
hard to find that in
Yeah.
a lot of supplements.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when we're trying to find things that work well for our patients, that's what we're doing in the background. We're looking at those spec sheets
Mhm.
and the tech sheets and going, okay, does the data actually make sense for what the claim is? So it's nice to see it and hear
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think especially right now, like, again, it's hard to find and sort through
Yes.
reliable information. I know even as a physician, when I get on and I start to look for something, it's buried deep now. So
Mhm.
you really almost have to go to medical sources to find it. So,
Yeah.
trusting that your pharmacy or your provider is doing that research for you is really key right now.
Yeah, it's super important in the supplement world in particular
Mm, oh, yeah.
because of the claims that could be made. Remember, they're
Mhm.
not drugs.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
and you see the little statement on the supplement bottles and boxes out there. So there's a lot more wiggle room, if you will, for the
Mhm.
supplement vendors to be able to do things and put stuff out there. So it's really important that you partner with practitioners that understand that supplement world. And it all goes back
Mhm.
to physiology, as you mentioned in the beginning, and understanding what that cell can and can't do,
Mhm.
and how can we optimize the function of that cell.
And I think actually we move more towards even regenerative anti-aging medicines more cellular now.
Mhm.
So understanding that cellular anatomy, physiology, the chemical
How do we
reactions,
support
and
it?
Mhm.
with the compounding pharmacies, again, how do we optimize cell health? And so when we start to look at it that way, it's a lot different.
Completely.
And so, yeah, you need to find somebody that you trust with that because you're right. The supplement world is not regulated. So you really need to have a professional line of supplements that somebody's looked at and they're third party tested and sent out, and that your providers and pharmacies have actually looked at the data behind the scenes. So that's important. And we do have a term for what you just did too. Like we have the term in our office, but I would call them a stud for science. Then,
there you
right?
go. Oh, that's right.
A stud for science. So like, you have to prove that it's right. So like we don't bring anything in
That's right.
to the office unless if somebody's kind of tested it out a little bit. So we have a term for that here.
Yeah.
And then, but for him, he would be stud
The
for
stud.
science.
There you go.
Stud
Versus the
science.
slut for science,
Yeah.
we talk
No.
about that.
Yeah. We have a slut for science is the female version of that.
Exactly.
We'll do whatever we need to do to look at it to make
And that's
sure.
why I said I'll be going to buy it and be using it myself. And
And Tim is here. He's the stud for
he's
science.
the stud for
now.
science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's perfect. But and so even again, nitric oxide and the effects of it. So ultimately it's increasing vascular flow.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so-
Yeah, absolutely. Bringing us back to it. Yeah, it's paramount for us to, in erectile dysfunction, that's what's leveraging those blood vessels to dilate and then get blood flow in and get engorgement. And if you're a male, to get an erection, and as a female, the same way, to get that tissue engorged. So it's important, and that is the paramount endogenous chemical that's got to be there. If we don't have it, then we end up pushing doses.
Yeah.
We get side effects, trying to leverage an effect with less of a fuel source, if you will. So by being able to have a healthy life, eat those things, and if you can't eat those right things, you add those supplements in when our body starts to be less efficient, then we're going to continue to be able to have that sexual wellness maximized even as we age.
And so sometimes I think with, erectile changes, so it could be pretty advanced by the time they come. And then sometimes it's just mild. So again, if it's maybe advanced at the beginning, doing those, because even if we try everything else, including Trimix, which is still, dependent on that pathway, if we're trying everything and it's not working, it may be that they're deficient as well. But I think then there's that middle range where they're on something that works and now it's no longer efficient or effective at work.
And we hear that a lot is this used to work and it doesn't work anymore. I think that's probably the biggest thing is then how high can I push my doses? Then the next question. And then it's like, well, the side effects. And we talk a lot about the side effect profile. So that's awesome that there's another option out there that we can try. And you had brought up Trimix or triple mix. So even with those guys, you were saying that sometimes you have to decrease the dose. Because of that increase in that nitric oxide.
When we bring something in, we like to get feedback from our patients. We explain it to them. We identify patients we think it'll be an advantage to the compounded preparation that they're using. One of those injectable patients, those triple mix guys that are having to use 3 different active ingredients to get erectile function to work normally, restore normally, they've got to have nitric oxides as a source. So in those patients, classically, when we look at kind of 3 parameters we track in those patients, they'll say, hey, it needs to get better because of. So their practitioner will say, what do you think? And we can change the volume they inject. We can change the doses of them, the drugs that are together. But ultimately, if we go back now, as we did in these guys that have been doing larger doses, because the effect wasn't what we wanted at kind of the lower doses of triple mix, we've given them these NO supplements, and all of a sudden now they're able to back off their doses and still get that same erectile function that they were achieving at much, much higher doses of compounded medication, which makes us happy because we're going to avoid side effects. It's cost effective for them. Their prescriptions are going to last longer. The compounded prescriptions are able to use those lower doses.
Anytime we can maximize or improve those natural pathways, that's always the option that we go. We talk a lot about that here in this office when we're talking about wellness and immunity. It's supporting
optimizing the cell health.
Exactly.
In those pathways. Yeah, absolutely. So we're super excited to hear about this today. So, and we'll try, and I love the fact that you can, again, test and then immediately they can test after, or maybe not immediately, but
in a couple hours.
A couple hours later, you repeat that saliva test and you get that objective measure to show you that
Mhm.
supplement's providing the
Mhm.
input it's supposed to.
Then you get objective function later to find out.
Hopefully.
Absolutely.
exactly,
Right?
yeah.
Hopefully, right?
That's the goal.
One more
So-
data point.
Yeah.
I know. Exactly. And you need those. So
Exactly.
So I think anything else about nitric oxide that we would need to add, because I think that like covers everything, again,
Well, I think
the
what-
fact that we can, increase that nitric oxide prior to,
Mhm.
because again, a lot of the guys that go online looking for stuff, they're looking at ways to kind of boost it.
Mhm.
But if you don't have a baseline production, then increasing that, and then you can still do the other, but also
Or
the
maybe the
trophies, that
supplement
will
you're
work better,
taking
yeah.
is not as effective as you thought it was.
correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I
That's,
think
that's huge.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the aging process. And now that we have supplements that can leverage other pathways
Mhm.
that we've always had, but we've not been able to leverage as we age, and that amino acid pathway fatigues, it just makes sense. We can transition you
Mhm.
between those products. If you're a young guy and the amino acid supplements are providing the results you need, great. Keep working with that supplement that's working for you. But as you age and you start thinking, wow, what's going on? That's not
Yeah.
working for me anymore. Then now you've got some other things we can look at and measure and provide you other options.
Mhm. Never would hurt to take a little more of good, nutraceuticals though
That's right.
at the same time, because lots of
Yeah.
other good cell pathways that would help as well. So,
Yeah.
well, perfect. So, comment, ask any questions, let us know what your concerns are, or if you have already used something that works that we didn't touch on. We would love to hear about it. And then hit the bell, subscribe, share with friends. And thank you guys for
Yeah.
coming.
Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for
Thank you.
being with us, Tim. And again, just remember, we're here to revitalize your look, your health, and your sex life. Thank you.